John, everyone's worked up over the NFL ratings. Amazon's up, Fox is up, CBS is up, NBC is up, ESPN is up.
What does it all mean, Andrew? No one can decide, and they're all getting a little worked up.
It doesn't take much, does it? That's not fair.
That's not okay, not Captain.
I'm
Captain
sorry.
Bruin over there.
I'm sorry.
And we're back. I'm Andrew Marchand, sports media columnist for the New York Post. He's John Ourand.
John Ourand.
From the Sports Business Journal, their fine media reporter. And this is the Marchand and Ourand Sports Media Podcast. John, this week, me and you, once again, upcoming guests include Jeff Passan next week. 2 weeks from now, we're scheduled to have Pedro Martinez. So going to get into some baseball.
We're getting into the baseball postseason. I can't think of two better guests.
All right, let's do it. Who's up? Who's down?
Who's up? Who's down?
All right, I'm going to start us off with the who's up. And I have Adam Silver, George Kliakoff, and Brett Yormark. And I have the two college conference commissioners and the NBA commissioner based solely on the first 2 weeks of Amazon's Thursday night football schedule. What did you have the over under at a couple weeks ago? I think you put it at like 8.5 million.
I think 7.5 million is where we're at.
7.5 million. I think I took the over on that, as I recall. But
it's like revisionist history of how we've discussed Amazon, but go ahead.
13 million people watched that first game. 11 million watched the second game. They still could. I mean, that when we said 7.5 million, it was for a full season, and there are some dog games ahead. But the way you couldn't have crafted, if you're Jay Marine, Jeff Bezos, Marie Donahue, Jared Stacey, you could not have crafted a better start to this. They're getting a lot of viewers, and they're getting younger viewers than traditional linear television. And if you're the NBA and you're one of the college conferences, they're answering one of the biggest questions that all of these conferences have. Do you have the reach? Are you able to see to reach a lot of people? And if they're able to talk about, we have 13 million people, not necessarily all streaming, but we have an audience of 13 million. That makes it a lot easier for these leagues and conferences to say, okay, maybe we will accept some of that Amazon money.
We're going to talk more about that when we get into Apple, Amazon, the NBA's new app, and we have a little information about the Pac-12 and the Big 12. So we'll get into that when we get to the topics. My who's up? Barry Bonds.
Barry Bonds, the villain of baseball, is up. And
Barry Bonds is my who's up, John, because of how good he was on the K-Rod cast. On Sunday, Michael Kay, the play-by-play announcer for the Yankees, and Alex Rodriguez, they have their sporadic kind of Manning cast, but don't call it a Manning cast because it's not associated with Omaha Productions. They have those alternative broadcasts, and Barry Bonds was a guest, and he was really good. He was smiling, which is, not something we saw from Barry Bonds as a player, and just the way he talked about hitting, the way he talked about Aaron Judge going after the record, trying to tie at that point Roger Maris's 61 home runs, was really informative. Barry Bonds has a bad reputation. I felt as a young reporter, John, when I was 22, 23, I was doing sidebars at the old Shea Stadium. It was the Mets, and he must have been with the Giants at that point, possibly still with the Pirates, but I think he was with the Giants at that point. Barry Bonds struck out 3 times that game. So they said, oh, young guy, Marchand, go do a sidebar on Barry Bonds striking out 3 times. He comes out.
Wait, hang on. I got to interrupt you. Who told you to do that? Who's the old crusty reporter that was like, Marchand, that's your beat?
It could have been Dave Waldstein, who's now at the New York Times. It could have been Joel Sherman. Probably was Joel. I don't remember exactly, but they basically, you're the young guy. They tell you what to do, and you go into the other club. I'll still chance to do a story on Barry Bonds, 22, 23. I'll take it. I'm waiting near his locker, respectfully 10 feet out. He comes out. He looks right at me, and he says, "You think I'm talking to you?" And so I went upstairs. He didn't talk to me, and I wrote, Barry Bonds actually struck out 4 times yesterday, 3 times during the game, and 1 time after the game, living up to his surly reputation. And I think I used the quote. So that was my experience with Barry Bonds. But Sunday, he was excellent with Kay and A-Rod. They also had Roger Clemens on. a lot of people focus on, obviously that's a lot of performance enhancing drugs involvement with those. But the thing I ask is, yes, these guys made mistakes, and A-Rod's back, right? He's in the mainstream. Bonds and Clemens, and Bonds was the hitting coach with the Marlins for a year, but they kind of feel like they've been kind of ostracized, not in the Hall of Fame, even though more writers than not vote for them to get in the Hall of Fame. It's just you need 75%. And I could just see Bonds. I'm not saying he could be I don't know if he'd want to be a full-time commentator, but he showed some skills if he wanted to do this. It's some broadcasting skills. Again, I don't know, over time he showed his like surly side a little bit and kind of I don't know how likable he would be over time, but he was good the other night.
Andrew, you're a baseball guy. You're obviously a baseball fan. You grew up with the game, Pirates fan. You were an early beat reporter with baseball. You only have one answer. What is the home run record in Major League Baseball right now?
The single season?
Yeah.
Barry Bonds, 73.
73. That leads into my who's down,
Okay.
Andrew. 73 is a record. And until somehow Major League Baseball tells us it's not the record, and even then maybe it will be. 73 is a record. My who's down is BURKE Magnus of ESPN, who was on this pod just a couple of weeks ago complaining about being down. But BURKE, a noted Yankee fan who works for Jimmy Pitaro, a noted Yankee fan, stop breaking into my college football telecast with Aaron Judge trying to set a team record. I don't want to see that. I'm watching college football. Wait until there's a break in the action and you can come in and say, hey, this just happened a second ago. And I would be happy as a sports fan. I'll tell you what, Andrew, there's this kid called Adley Rushman. He has the biggest wins above replacement of any rookie catcher since Mike Piazza when he was with the Dodgers. I want ESPN to break in every time Adley Rushman comes to the plate. I'm that's what I'm interested in, right? I just think that they're doing it too much. I'm watching a college football game. They're not just breaking in with a box. They're taking the audio there as well. I just don't want to see it. I want to see college football. Only this scenario. Roger Goodell was almost my who's up for saying you cannot do it in Monday Night Football. And good for you, Roger Goodell. Let's stop breaking in. 61 doesn't mean a lot to me as an Oriole fan.
Two things. Number one, you're correct overall, right? During college football, it doesn't make sense to me to break in with the overall at bat and taking the announcers to having Michael Kay from the Yes Network broadcast to a national audience. Doesn't make sense. That's too disruptive. I agree. After, if you hit the home run, then you come to it right away. That makes more sense. You're completely wrong in terms of significance of 61, though. That is, yes, Barry Bonds is the record, but 61 is a part of American sports lexicon. And the Yankees, I get it. You're an Oriole fan. A lot of people feel like there's a Yankee bias. Yeah, there's a Yankee bias. They're the top team in baseball forever, and they're the biggest franchise. You could argue in our country, and they're top 5, top 10 in the world. And so, yes, it means more, that number. There's been movies about 61. So I do think there's significance of it. And the other thing about Monday Night Football and Roger Goodell, the Giants were playing Monday. If there was a date that you should have done the 2 box, and you could have had something kind of cool happen. Now, Aaron Judge did not hit a home run on Monday, but if you had Joe Buck making the call, calling the Giant game, and then calling Judge's home run, listen, for $15 million, he should be able to do both. And I think he could have, and that would have been pretty good. If you did that. I'm pretty sure the NFL didn't want to share that big audience with baseball and give them more attention. And so that got kiboshed. And I agree with you on the college football. All right.
And what about Adley Rushman? You have to agree with it. Let's start breaking into the Orioles games, right? I mean, this is historic.
You definitely should be breaking into somebody who you need to explain who they are every 5 seconds. All right. My who's down, CBS Sports. Jets Bengals feed went out, the video for a little bit, and then the audio for nearly the whole fourth quarter. They said they had problems at the stadium. You couldn't hear Ian Eagle and Charles Davis doing that Jets Bengals game. It was garbage time, as Marv would have said back in the day, but still. Imagine if that happened with Amazon, where they lost the video or audio feed. So I just think that that's an obvious who's down, because that can't happen. And things, look, here's the thing about it with Amazon, with CBS. Yes, they're supposed to be perfect, but nobody's perfect. These things do happen, and sometimes it's out of your control. But again, these are the broadcast networks. You don't expect that. The game was over, so they were fortunate, because that really could have been really awful if that was a very tight game for CBS. A lot of complaints still, but again, if it was Amazon or Apple, one of these new streamers, and that happened, we'd be talking that'd be leading the pod, and we'd be talking about it for weeks and maybe years to come.
My Who's Down would have been set, right?
Chris Ripley would have had from Sinclair would have had some company in terms of legendary Who's Downs.
All right, well, let's get right into the topics, because it does lead to Apple, to Amazon. Apple had a historic night where it had Albert Pujols hitting his 700th home run. It had Aaron Judge potentially hitting 61. You have Sunday tickets still experiencing problems. You have Amazon with Thursday night football. Grouping all these into an overall streaming topic here. We're here, right? I mean, streaming is here.
We are, but last week after the pod and kind of during the pod, I had some stories that, that along with what was going on in other places, made a lot of noise in terms of Apple doing that game last Friday. Even the Attorney General of New York chimed in saying that the game last Friday needed to be offered on the paid subscription cable network. Yes, even though Apple was offering it for free. That's where this rose to. Aaron Judge ended up not hitting his 61st home run. Here's the thing that I want to ask you. Okay, you can chime in on that too.
Yeah, I got to chime in for a second, because we hate getting into politics. We're experts on sports media, but that was embarrassing. It was a couple of statements that came out. It got facts wrong. They decided that they would rather have New York City residents that want to see this historic home run pay more money to cable and satellite operators than to get a streaming service and download it for free via Apple. I understand why she did it. It was politically popular, I suppose. Hey, have more people see it. At every step, your Attorney General made the wrong decision and had the wrong reasons for it.
Let's just finish this argument, actually, that we're kind of getting at. Apple had a decision to make. They could have shared the game with Yes, and the Yankees were willing to basically do anything, take Apple's feed, put their announcers on, help them with any way. Apple said no. Now, I talked to some smart executives who said that they would have done the opposite, that they would have let Yes broadcast the game in the New York footprint, and then you would have had more people watching. You could have advertised all your shows and would have been goodwill towards Apple, and you'd still would have the national audience. I think there's some merit to that argument. Now, Apple did get this game exclusively. They got more signups. The problem for me is with the Apple deal overall is that, again, this was the last game, but there wasn't that repetitive, let me check this out and then I'm going to check it out again. It annoys me because your team's on this week, then I'm going to check it out, because if I even do that, and from what I understand in terms of numbers, not that many people did it, but let's just say you did do that, you weren't coming back the next week. And to me, that was the whole overall problem with this MLB deal for Apple.
I had, I wish I could remember who did this. I love getting nominations for Who's Down. And I had somebody on Twitter reach out and said, you got to do Marchand for Who's Down, for advocating that Apple give up its exclusive rights to the one game that really matters for Apple.
I didn't say, hold on a second. I got to disagree with this person who tweeted or how you just said that. I didn't say give up. I said reach more people in the New York area through Yes to advertise more. Again, I didn't say I definitely would do it. I think there's merit to that argument.
Look, we're both in advertising-based businesses. Of course, there's merit to saying, I want to put it on over-the-air television in New York City and just kind of market our wares and work it that way. This is a rights deal. They got people to sign up for Apple TV Plus. They were able to people within their little walled garden that they have, within their app, are able to advertise the different shows that they have on Apple TV Plus. Who knows how many people they upsold in order to watch Ted Lasso or whatever other shows that they have. We always bring up Ted Lasso as an example. What was the other show that they had about
the morning show?
The We Crashed show. I watch out with my wife. Highly recommended. Very good. but that's why they have it. And yeah, I think people got annoyed because people are used to watching with Michael Kay and on Yes Network. But this is precisely why it went to Apple. If it was on Turner, let's say, would you be advocating for Turner to say, okay, just make it available to everybody for free and you'll get a ton out of advertising on it? And I understand linear TV is different than streaming, but if I ran Apple, and you cite a smart business executive, I'm certainly not that, but if I ran Apple, I would have done exactly what Apple did. I would have kept it within, I would have gotten people's email addresses and logins, and I would have upsold plenty of them, and it would have been profitable for me.
Look, I think you go either way. I could see Apple's point, definitely. All right, overall, is this a good deal for Apple? This baseball deal?
It's so hard to say. I don't know. Here's what's so unique about Amazon's NFL deal and why Amazon was who's up, and also why I spent so much time over the past 2 weeks diving into these TV numbers like I haven't for anybody else, because we don't see streaming numbers. Like they're no, Nielsen doesn't come in and monitor the streaming and then put out the reports that we're able to see. So that's what makes Thursday Night Football so unique. It's like, okay, how are people watching these games via streaming, and how does that differ than linear TV? With Apple, nobody knows. I don't know whether they're getting 10 people watching, 10,000 people watching, or 100,000 people watching. Advertisers that buy in, some of them don't know either. They hold their viewership figures so close to the vest. I don't know how many people are watching. I don't know how many signups they've gotten. I don't know how many upsells they've gotten. I don't know how many sort of eyeballs they've been able to market to. It is so hard to determine whether that's a success or not.
No, it's not. Oh, hold on a second. No. Here's a rule. You're good. You're like more businessy with the numbers. The less emails that you get about these things, the worse they're doing. Okay.
Yeah, I was about to do that too. I saw the very first game, which was the Nationals and Phillies, because I live in DC. I wanted to check it out. I saw the one Orioles game that they played on, and I also I will have to admit I tuned in to see whether or not Judge would get Maris's record on Friday. So me personally, as a big baseball fan, yeah, I barely tuned in.
Not only that, though, they'll tell you when it's, again, Apple's different, right? They operate different, very arrogant, and they're not going to like share that much. They don't seem to do that in any of their things. I just think sports is fundamentally different. They're Apple, right? It's like kind of like Amazon too. Amazon's Amazon, but in this realm, you're the new kid on the block. You're not, yes, you guys are the biggest companies going anywhere and the most powerful, but in this, they're the new kids on the block. So you gotta overpay for the NFL if you're Amazon. If you're Apple, you're trying to make it so your service is someplace that leagues and teams potentially want to be, and they'll get a chance to show some things with the MLS deal potentially, if that can be a success. But that's where I think it's a little bit, and again, I was told some numbers. I'm not going to share them because I don't have them verified in any way. So, but they weren't good.
Look,
and so,
if you're going to hold a gun to my head and say, was it a success or not? Of course, I think I'm going to say that it's not. But I think there are also so many questions. Like this was not a traditional rights deal for Apple. So what were they trying to learn from this? And what did they learn from this? Both technically with a video feed, with just trying to get different announcers to call the games. So maybe this was sort of a sunken cost, like an R&D cost for them.
Well, let's just finish up. Sunday Ticket. What can you tell us about Sunday Ticket?
Sunday Ticket. I'm told that not to expect anything until the end of the year, if not a little bit sooner than that. But our boy Trip Mickle, are you done with the book yet?
No.
Come on.
I'm still doing I'm not kind of reading my Breathe book more now. So the by James Nestor, it's very good. But I still have that. We're looking 2026. That's the over under.
Well, Trip Mickle had a story in the New York Times recently talking about Apple sponsoring the halftime show at the Super Bowl. And so the person negotiating that deal for the halftime show is Eddie Q at Apple, and it's our friend Brian Rolap at the NFL. Well, the two people negotiating for Sunday Ticket are Eddie Q at Apple and Brian Rolap at the NFL. And so Tripp had a story. People really should click on it because he reported that the NFL is trying to get Google and Amazon and a lot of digital companies to bid on Sunday Ticket. And the reason being to try to get the money to go up for Apple, who is notorious about trying to drive a hard bargain and pay less. Everybody talks about Apple's deep pockets. They're notorious about not reaching all the way into those deep pockets. So the implications and the suggestions coming from that story are that a deal could be had or should be had by the end of the year, but they're not nearly to the point to where they're crossing T's or dotting I's, and there's still a lot of negotiating left to go.
Yeah, well, that's going to be interesting. I had heard maybe Halloween. Do you still expect Apple to get this?
Apple is the only one that's had significant discussion so far with the NFL. If Apple doesn't get it, then maybe it's NFL Plus. I don't know. Yes, I still expect Apple.
That was a good denial, which brings us to our next topic.
Well, a couple of weeks ago, Andrew, you came on the pod and you said this.
I think the Pac-12 and ESPN, hundreds of millions of dollars apart. They are not even close.
That went through college sports media, and it forced the commissioner of the Pac-12, George Kliavkoff, to go onto a podcast with John Stizano and John Wilner and address that. And this is what Commissioner K said.
Well, listen, since June 30th, we've heard a chorus of, things reported through the media, almost always not attributable to an individual, but reported that are, in my estimation, attempts to destabilize our conference. And, for the first couple of weeks that it had an effect and everybody was, kind of vibrating as a result of some of this nonsense. At this point, our 10 schools are completely focused on the future and being together and confident in each other. And it's now almost a running joke at our board meetings. What's the latest nonsense that someone has thrown against the wall, and seeing whether or not someone will report.
And Andrew, I got to tell you, it sounds like, talk about a non-denial denial. That sounds like a non-denial denial. He didn't necessarily say that your report was wrong.
Yeah, it's correct. They're so I got more sources on it. You got me a little motivated. Yeah, so I already knew it was correct, but they're hundreds of millions of dollars apart. The negotiating window with Fox wasn't like, when it was kind of announced that it was open, wasn't originally open. There were some couple little things that had to get. Now they have spoken. I think they're going to be hundreds of millions of dollars apart as well. If they do get to numbers, and so. We talked about this, that they want to get Amazon or Apple involved to try to drive up this price. But, I think that they maybe want, I don't know for certain, $50 million per team, which might have happened if they hadn't lost UCLA and USC to the Big Ten. Now, Commissioner K said people want to destabilize the Pac-12. I have no interest in that. Like I know he's kind of just talking, but like that is not. I actually was the one who reported that ESPN, if they didn't get the Big Ten, would probably turn to the Pac-12. That was when they had UCLA and USC, and if they had them still, they'd be pretty well positioned. Their problem is the Big 12 is now talking to ESPN and Fox, and if they were to do a deal earlier, then I don't know where that would leave the Pac-12. Now they can pray that Amazon is going to give them big money, but Amazon doesn't really operate like that. They're not just going to, they overspent for the NFL because it's the NFL, and I think they did have higher bids at the end for the Big Ten that they, lost out to CBS and NBC, really the NBC package, I believe at night. But they kind of look at Amazon like Amazon looks at themselves as equal players, not something like we're new and we should pay even more than somebody else. So I don't know where the Pac-12 necessarily gets that money. And this is where I think it's really important. If the Big 12 moves quickly, which perhaps they might, I don't know where the Pac-12 is going to be left if the Big 12 is able to make a deal with ESPN and Fox or one or the other.
I am much more positive about the Pac-12's prospects than you are. And let's be clear, when you say that they're hundreds of millions of dollars apart, that's not hundreds of millions per year. That's over
the life of the
the
contract. I
lifetime
think
of
it's a 5-year deal.
right. So they're getting ready to come out of their exclusive window with Fox and ESPN. ESPN still wants it. Fox still wants it. Amazon has shown that it wants to get into college football. It put in the biggest bid for the Big Ten, and it's based in the middle of Pac-12 country. I think there are also other linear television companies that are going to be kicking the tires in order to keep the rights fee up pretty high. I think you look at somebody like Turner. They've long looked at wanting to get in. Nobody's talked about Turner. We've barely mentioned Turner on the pod since we started it.
But let me ask you a question. If Pac-12 goes to Turner, you think that's a good move?
Depends on what it looks like. I don't know. I don't know what it looks like. Turner is a
college football. I just don't think if you're the Pac-12 without UCLA and USC, you want to be on some island by yourself.
Is it good for Notre Dame to be on NBC?
It's Notre Dame. I mean, that's like a rhetorical question. It's
I don't.
Notre Dame.
Look.
Notre Dame. They're their own conference. Notre Dame's in a different category of anybody.
I know they lost USC and UCLA, but I'm telling you, Stanford, Cal, Oregon, Washington, Arizona, Colorado, they have big brands that still exist in the Pac-12. They have companies in Apple and Amazon, which operate in the Pac-12, and they have linear TV networks where the Pac-12 still has a lot of value for them, especially in those sort of later night windows that are out there. I know that I'm not disagreeing with you. They're far apart, and that's why they're going out of their negotiating window. I totally back you on that. I think that they're far enough apart that it would be an easy enough bridge to pass.
I want to stabilize the Pac-12. If I were them, I would not be too greedy.
Thanks, Marshawn.
All right.
All right, let's go to the next topic. The NFL launched NFL Plus just over the past offseason. The NBA just recently came out with its new app. It's going to have the out-of-market package, NBA League Pass. It's going to have highlights, whip-around shows. And what really gets me, there's going to be an extraordinary amount of gambling and gambling-related services on the app as well.
So this is one of those, this wouldn't surprise me things, John, that you love. It wouldn't surprise me if the NBA is starting to think about the regional sports networks possibly cratering, and can they create a one-stop shopping for their local games. I'm not saying that's happening soon. There's a lot of contracts that are up at different times, but when you look long-term, these tides start to rise, right? So you see Amazon do well on Thursday, which you've mentioned a lot of times, especially when your who's up, you start to see where it's going. And so we've talked about ESPN and going to direct to consumer within the next 2 to 3 years with the mothership, as well as being on cable. If you're the NBA, are they starting to plan for the idea that they could just they could cut out the middleman, they could centralize how they do the broadcast, and they could just sell to consumers the individual games for teams, and with RSNs maybe going out of business eventually? I'm not saying it's happening tomorrow, but are they building that infrastructure? I think it's a very obvious yes. Not that it's going to happen, but a very obvious yes. And perhaps also you look at what the MLS did with Apple. Is that where they could perhaps see where you team with somebody like an Apple or an Amazon or an ESPN Plus and Disney, and where they're selling your subscription? Because you probably need a bigger entity to be around. But I do think that's what we're starting to see, and that's what the NBA with the improved app and a little bit of a cheaper price, you can get all this for $99 for the year. I think that's what they're doing.
The linchpin there for me is the out-of-market package, because everybody that the baseball and basketball and hockey has talked to about partnering on a national streaming service with local rights, nobody is going to do that without having those out-of-market rights, so that they can do an iTunes for sports of sorts. Like I do want to see this Wizards Knicks game, so I'll spend $2.99 for that, as opposed to or I'll get the Wizards for a full season. So that's certainly one of them. the idea of I've heard these rumors, the idea of Apple and Amazon coming in and sort of saving things could be something down the road. But just knowing people that I know in both companies, there's zero interest in maintaining or running a traditional linear regional sports network. And none of the teams and none of the leagues are willing to gamble to let those die while they're still bringing in money for who knows how long. I mean, that's a different conversation than we've been having about when will Disney make ESPN available direct to consumer. They're going to try to stick with this linear regional sports networks for as long as they can.
No doubt about it, but I do think they're kind of building that infrastructure. I think that's what you're seeing, and that's what, again, they're trying to build a business right now, but also it's not a complementary business. Maybe they skip the middleman going forward. All right, JJ Redick, I reported, and then ESPN announced it later that he has an expanded role. He's going to do 25 at least games, about half of those teaming with Richard Jefferson. I'll have a play-by-player. They got a couple of people in mind that I heard Ryan Rucco, Dave Pasch, I think might be the leading candidates to be with that team. And so when you look at it, Redick really has made quite a broadcasting career for himself. There's a new 3-year deal, I think big money, 7 figures plus. And he also has his podcast that just moved to Amazon. And then so he's doing real well, Redick, post-playing career. I think he's making almost nearly as much money as he was, some of those years he was playing. So JJ Redick could be a big fixture. He's going to be a big fixture on ESPN's coverage and maybe for years and years to come.
Let's talk about a good post-playing career. And you have the Manning brothers, Peyton and Eli, and Omaha Productions, the biggest winners to come out of the NFL deciding to do away with the Pro Bowl game and just having Omaha Productions produce what's going to be a flag football game. It's going to be sort of like a battle of the network stars back in the day, who can throw it the longest, who can throw it the most accurate, who's the fastest. I think that's something that has a lot of potential. I'm not sure if it'll get that many more viewers than the Pro Bowl got. The Pro Bowl was right around 7 million viewers, 8 million viewers. Amazingly, I never know anybody that actually sat down and watched the Pro Bowl, but somehow they would always get a nice, healthy number. I think that is a way to generate a lot of excitement and make it a lot more youthful moving forward.
That's one of my favorite lines you've had in the podcast about the Pro Bowl. And nobody admits to watching it, but somehow they get great viewership. The Mannings are all over the place. They're making podcast deals with a bunch of people. They got the McAfee thing coming with the college football alternative broadcast, and then of course on Monday night that's been a big deal. And they have a lot of things in the works. So where's that building towards? I think they're going to try to sell that thing for $1 billion at some point. That's my guess. You've seen it with LeBron, what he's done, and this is sort of the wave of the future. Stephen A's starting to kind of sounds like he's trying to build his own thing with his podcast, and I think kind of getting his own business, but still remaining under that ESPN umbrella. But that's kind of where people are branching out. It's very interesting.
But what makes them successful is their content's good. They put out good content, so it's not just sort of attaching a big name to it, and it's actually making things that people want to see.
100%. All right, let's finish it up with our call of the week.
Call of the week.
Well, we have spent a baseball season killing Apple TV Plus productions, but we have Wayne Randazzo calling Albert Pujols' 700th career home run, and I thought he did a pretty nice job. Let's give it a listen.
Pujols sends one in the air. It's deep to left. Taylor's back at the wall. It's 700. Albert Pujols has joined the 700 home run club.
What Randazzo did really well there, John, in my opinion, was he focused on the number because that's the significance of it. And then he kind of got out, which is what you want to do in these big moments. We talked about Aaron Judge a lot, and that one, because of the Bonds record, because of the shadow of steroids, and is it the real record? How do you handle it? And to me, that calls the same thing. The 61 and the 62, those are monumental numbers in American sports lexicon. And for baseball, hitting 700 home runs is a huge deal. And so you want to focus on that 700, and Randazzo hit it very well and then let the crowd take over. And so I thought that was a good job by Wayne Randazzo, who works very closely with Howie Rose, who's a legendary New York play-by-player who had the famous Matteau call in '94 with the Rangers, and how he's kind of, the Mets have had that legendary lineage in the broadcast booth, and how he's done that, and kind of Randazzo had to fight for his spot here in New York on WFAN as the Mets #2 guy, and that was a moment for him that he hit the high note when he needed to.
Well, that brings us to the end of another pod. As you said, next week we're going to have Jeff Passan from ESPN, Pedro Martinez scheduled for the following week. Please, as always, rate and post a nice comment on wherever you find the podcast out. I want to do a special thank you, as always, to AC Wyatt and Chris Mason, who put this thing together. And Andrew, I'll see you next week.
Sounds good. Look forward to it, John.